Stepping into the quiet of my own home, something felt off. The unfamiliar murmur from the basement stopped me dead in my tracks. My husband, Eric, was supposed to be at work. Blood rushed to my face as my heart picked up its pace. It was his voice mingled with a woman's that reached my ears. "My name is Anna Bellamy. I'm 40, a straightforward kind of person, working an everyday job at a publishing house. Eric and I, we promised to lead a simple life together, no kids, just the two of us growing old. That was our plan, and it had been working fine for the last 5 years, until now. They say comfort breeds complacency. Maybe that's what happened to us. Eric had started letting himself go, his belly peeking over his belt more than I'd ever seen before. You should take care of yourself, I had told him one evening, but he just shrugged, more interested in whatever was on his phone. We weren't the couple we once were, constantly trying to impress each other. I stopped bothering with makeup around him, and he didn't seem to mind. Maybe that was the problem, I thought. But then, just when you think you've got everything figured out, life throws you a curveball. A few weeks ago, a different kind of energy buzzed around Eric. He began paying attention to his looks again, buying new clothes and checking himself out in the mirror. To me, he just seemed to be trying to feel better about getting older. I didn't read much into it. But now, here I was, standing in our house while the sound of his laughter, shared with someone who wasn't me, echoed from the basement. Should I rush downstairs and confront them? The thought tempted me, a simple enough solution, but instinct held me back. This needed to be handled carefully. I wouldn't rush in. I'd catch them when they least expected it. I'd gather proof first. So, pressing a hand to my racing heart, I decided to act like everything was normal and waited for the right moment. As the sound of their voices cut through the stillness of my once peaceful home, I knew things were about to change. I wasn't just going to be the betrayed wife. I'd be the one who turned the tables on Eric. But to do it right, I had to keep my cool. The next morning, at work, the tightness in my chest hadn't eased. I buried myself in manuscripts and edits, trying to put the whispers from the basement out of my mind. Mid-morning, Judy from accounting sidled up to my desk with an air of casual gossip. "I saw Eric at the mall yesterday," she began, her voice a half-whisper. "He was with someone who looked quite a bit like you from the back." I chuckled, the sound hollow, keeping my eyes on the screen as if the words before me held all my attention. "Well, I haven't been to the mall in weeks," I replied, brushing off her comment. Must have been his sister visiting from out of town. Judy seemed to accept that, returning to her numbers and spreadsheets. But her words gnawed at me, digging into the well of unease that had settled in my stomach. Was this why Eric was so keen on his new wardrobe? Was he dressing up for someone else? The thought wrestled with my reason. The Eric I knew wouldn't do something like that, or so I reassured myself, chasing away the doubts that sought to overwhelm me. Denial was a comfortable blanket, shielding me from the chill of my suspicions. Throughout the day, my gaze lingered on my phone more than necessary, half expecting some incriminating message to pop up or a call from a strange number. But there was nothing, just the usual spam emails and texts about dinner plans with friends. By the time the workday ended, my resolve had hardened. First thing at home, I was going to look for anything out of place, any little clue to confirm or dispel my fears. I needed to know, and if there was something to find, I had to be smart about how I handled it. That evening, Eric greeted me with his usual peck on the cheek and a cheery, "How was your day?" I mirrored his normalcy with a laugh and a light-hearted recount of work. But as we settled into our evening side by side on the couch, the sounds from the basement replayed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I waited until Eric was distracted by a phone call before I started my search. My hands felt foreign as I opened drawers and peered into his home office. Papers, folders, nothing out of the ordinary. But tucked in the back of his desk's bottom drawer, there it was, a piece of glossy lipstick pink paper, a receipt for a boutique hotel dated last Saturday. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach as I read the words over and over again. This was it, the proof I needed. With shaking hands, I took a picture of the receipt with my phone and slid it back into place. I needed to collect more evidence before I confronted him. For now, I'd keep wearing the mask of the clueless wife, but it wouldn't be for long. The next few days passed in a thick fog, each moment laced with the sharp tang of deception. At each shared meal, every mundane conversation, I appraised Eric with a detective's eye, mining his words for clues, his expressions for guilt. He was none the wiser, and why should he be? I had always been trusting, an open book to his calculated cover story. The internet became my accomplice, guiding me silently on how to catch a cheater. I dove into forums and articles, searching for ways to document his dishonesty without tipping him off. Someone suggested tracking his phone, but no, that would be too risky. He might notice, and the game would be up. One evening, as I watched him thumbing his phone with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, an idea struck. He had a habit of taking his showers long and hot, leaving his phone charging on the nightstand. That was my window, brief but just enough to gather what I needed. The first time I slipped his phone from its cradle, thumbing through the messages and call log, my pulse raced, but there was nothing, no suspicious texts, no unknown numbers. He was careful, deleting any trace of his infidelity. Yet I persisted. I started waking up earlier, checking his car for unfamiliar items, tracing his expenditures on our shared credit cards. I found little things. A stray earring under the car seat, a receipt for a necklace I never received, dinner charges for two at places we'd never been together. Each discovery, a painful confirmation of his affair, became evidence, photographed, noted, filed away. All the while I kept up appearances, enduring the agony of pretending. It was becoming more difficult, though, playing the part of the loving wife oblivious to her husband's betrayal. My resolve was strong, but the strain was starting to show. Then came the morning that changed the course of my silent investigation. I opened his gym bag ostensibly to toss in a fresh towel, but instead my fingers brushed against something hard and cool, a burner phone tucked away beneath his workout clothes. It felt like a small bomb in my hands, the potential for destruction palpable against my skin. I didn't dare turn it on, not then, not with Eric humming to himself just rooms away. But it was the missing piece, the secret channel through which he maintained his double life. I couldn't let on that I knew, so I left the phone where I found it. The time for accusations and confrontations was drawing closer. I could feel it, sense the impending climax to this charade, but until then, I would have to shoulder the weight of my silent burden, a heart heavy yet hopeful for the eventual unmasking that awaited. My retribution, when it came, would be silent but devastating. It was all in the timing, and I was counting down the days until I could let the guillotine fall. In a small locked box, I collected my cache of evidence, a trove of whispered hotel dates and covert dinners. The secret burner phone lay nestled among this collection, its presence a harsh reminder of Eric's betrayal. Somehow, the physical weight of it, cold and metallic, brought home the truth more than any digital record ever could. My once benign routines became a cover for the clandestine business of gathering proof. I memorized Eric's schedule, noted the slight deviations, the minutes unaccounted for, the hushed tones I caught him using when he thought I was far from earshot. Each observation, each slip, was meticulously recorded and hidden away. I was the unseen collector, operating in the fleeting solitude that our life together afforded. There, in those precious moments I could call my own, I documented everything with a dispassionate efficiency that surprised even myself. It was as if my heart had been replaced by a ledger, keeping score of lies and half-truths. The burner phone was turning into the linchpin of my evidence. One day, feigning a headache, I stayed home from work while Eric, convinced of my illness-bound lethargy, departed for the office without a second thought. As the front door clicked shut, I sprang into action. The forgotten gym bag lay still, untouched, as if waiting for me. I turned the phone on, and the contents laid his affair bare. Texts, calls, pictures I wished I could unsee, all painting the vivid portrait of a man ensnared in infidelity. I kept my breathing steady as I transferred everything I needed to my own phone. With each passing day, I felt the walls of our marriage closing in, as if our house was conspiring in keeping me trapped in this masquerade. But I would not allow myself to be suffocated by bitterness. The knowledge I was amassing was my oxygen, my empowerment. Each evening, when Eric returned home with his infectious smile and his arms laden with the facade of normalcy, I played my part. Welcome home, I'd say, leaning into his kiss that had lost all meaning. It was a necessary act, the cost of which was a growing numbness where there was once love and warmth. In public, we were the perfect couple. At home, I was the watchful hawk, biding my time. To the outside world, I must have seemed unchanged, the same reliable Anna with her quick smile and ready laugh. But behind my eyes was the steel of a woman unmade and remade by betrayal. The pressure mounted within me, a helium balloon straining against its string. My plan was nearing completion, the stage set for the final act. Yet I would wait for the perfect moment to cut the ties that bound us, to let the truth ascend into the light where all could see. My patience, it seemed, was finally rewarded. A slip of the tongue, a minor oversight. Eric was only human, after all. He mentioned a weekend conference, a necessary trip out of town. My instinct prickled, antennas raised in suspicion. There had been no talk of this conference before, no emails, no printed itineraries lying around, nothing but his words to attest to its existence. The pieces clicked into place, a mosaic of imminent confrontation. My evidence was substantial, a foundation sturdy enough to bear the weight of the accusations to come. But there was a crescendo I was yet to orchestrate, had to catch them, him and his mistress, in the act. Eric's careful nature was both a curse and a blessing. He scheduled his trysts meticulously, but in his assuredness he repeated patterns. And so I found a new kind of resolve in the waiting, embodying stillness, with a heart that thrummed in anticipation of the storm to come. The day of Eric's conference dawned, and I bade him farewell with an embrace that masked the tremors of my adrenaline. Hours trickled by, each second a surging tide that threatened to overwhelm my resolve. I would not yield. With the evening's spread of darkness, I returned home. There, nestled between the familiar walls, I heard them, the muffled symphony of deceit playing out beneath my feet once again. Quietly descending the stairs, I paused at the door of the basement, the epicenter of his treachery. A phone call, no more than a whisper, was all it had taken. A paid service, one that guaranteed discretion. From the shadows of the basement's interior, two figures emerged into the dim light, laughing, unaware. Their reverie was short-lived. The door closed with a soft, decisive click, the metallic turn of the key sealing their fate. Now locked within the depths of their own indiscretion, Marcus and his paramour slowly realized their predicament. Through a vent, the subtle rise of summer heat seeping in like an uninvited guest. No windows to ease the stifling embrace, no escape from the prison of their own making. I retreated upstairs, thus to the sanctuary of the airy living room. My lips curled into a half-smile, the first true expression I had allowed myself in weeks. I imagined them below, the sweat beginning to bead on their brows, the lack of fresh air lending a sense of reality to their trapped situation. I felt no need for haste. The basement was stocked with water, and ironically, canned food that I would never have thought would serve them in such a scenario. They would be safe, for a time, but they would not be comfortable. That was, after all, the point. Hours crawled by, and I occupied myself with a book, the words scarcely registering as my thoughts remained below. Only when the air adopted the heady thickness of an unventilated room did I descend once more. To them my footsteps must have sounded like salvation, yet my expression offered no reprieve. The cool indifference in my gaze met their flushed, anxious faces. And there in the stillness, the gravity of my quiet retribution hung between us like a tangible force. The air in the basement was heavy with heat and desperation as I faced Eric and his mistress, trapped by their own misdeeds. Their eyes were wide, the sheen of sweat on their skin reflecting more than just the oppressive temperature. This was the moment of reckoning I had quietly cultivated. "Anna," Eric stammered, his usual composure dissolving into the thick air. I can explain." His words fell flat, the futility of his situation rendering them meaningless. The woman beside him, a silhouette of regret, remained silent, her downcast eyes betraying her shame. The evidence I had amassed was now a silent witness to their affair. I laid it bare before them, the photographs, messages, and receipts, each artifact a testament to Eric's deceit. The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of my knowledge. "The consequences come now," I told them, my voice steady, belying the cauldron of emotions within. "I have enough here to ensure you both pay dearly for this betrayal." My gaze shifted to the woman unnamed and insignificant to me until this catalyst moment. "I trusted you," I said, my eyes locking onto hers, allowing her to feel the weight of my words. "You helped destroy a marriage. The guilt is yours to carry as well." Eric attempted to reach out to offer some gesture of reconciliation, but it was too late for empty appeasements. I knew that behind closed doors, apologies are often less about remorse and more about seeking absolution for the guilty. Captured within the confines of the dark basement, neither could escape the heat nor the confrontation. My presence was the gatekeeper to their freedom, and I held the power they had thoughtlessly gambled away. Though part of me wanted to linger, to savor the moment of their penance, I knew the time for exit statements had arrived. With a final glimpse at their wilted forms, I turned to leave, the key to their release secure in my hand, a return to their cage only I would dictate. In the coolness of the living room, I contemplated the legalities to come. Both would face repercussions beyond this personal prison I'd created. I would see to it that my divorce from Eric and claims against the mistress for damages would leave them both with little more to show for their affair than the scars it had seared upon us all. Finality had a certain weight to it, a sense of irrevocability that paced hand in hand with relief. As the days slipped by and my new reality set in, the last echoes of betrayal that had so marred the fabric of my life with Eric began to fade into a distant murmur. The divorce proceedings were a cold march through legal documents and negotiations. Eric had few avenues for defense, and perhaps for the first time in our descent into this mess, he didn't try to swindle his way through. He knew the evidence I had was unforgiving, and so he capitulated to the demands set by my lawyer. Meanwhile, the mistress had all but vanished into the quiet aftermath of exposed infidelity. A small part of my conscience pondered her fate, but I quickly snuffed it out. She was collateral in a war she'd chosen to wage against a marriage that wasn't hers. The claim I filed against her for emotional distress was a reminder of that choice, a shadow that would follow her long after the doors of my life closed on this chapter. Sitting in the office of my attorney, signing off on the settlement agreement, I didn't feel the surge of triumph I had envisioned. It was rather a peaceful closing of a book I was more than ready to shelve. Eric's signature, a scrawled loop on the bottom of the page, was the last tether to a man I no longer recognized. With the formalities done, I sold the house, the scene of so much concealed anguish, and moved into a modest apartment. It was a blank canvas, a place of my own that slowly began to hum with the rhythm of my single life. I found joy in the small things. Mornings filled with solitude and reflection, kettles that whistled just for one, and quiet evenings that embraced me without the residue of lies. My friends, those true companions who had stood by through the storm, crowded my new space with warmth and laughter, stitching together the ragged edges left by divorce. The confidence to love again didn't surge back overnight. It returned in soft whispers, gentle nudges from those who cared for me, reminding me that not all was lost in the realm of the heart. Sunday brunches became my excursion into social terrains, and casual conversations with newcomers sparked the tentative flickers of interest. As I settled into this reinvented life, I realized triumphant tales aren't only forged in the fires of vengeance, but also in the quiet resilience that builds the bridges to tomorrow. I was laying down the planks with each day that passed. Standing on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the city below, I knew that from these remnants of a life undone, I was ready to spin dreams anew. There was hope in the sunrise, and in its golden blaze, I found the promise that, come what may, there were better days ahead and perhaps, just maybe, a new love waiting just beyond the bend, just beyond the bend, just beyond the bend.